My daughter-in-law screamed, "Get out!" The next day, I moved into my $90 million Carmel villa. I was folding a towel when the doorbell rang. Not the front door, the back door, the one that leads to the patio where I used to drink my morning coffee and watch the hummingbirds fight over the feeder, the one my husband installed himself 43 years ago. I remember he cut his thumb on the metal, and I wrapped it in a paper towel and kissed his knuckles and said, "You are so stubborn. Why won't you let me call someone?" He just laughed. That was the kind of man he was, or the kind of man I thought he was. The towel was pale yellow. I remember that too. I had bought a set of 6 from Target 2 weeks earlier. Soft ones, the kind that don't scratch your skin when you dry your hands. I was folding it into a perfect square, the way my mother taught me. Corners tucked in tight, no wrinkles. She said a woman's home is a reflection of her soul. I believed her for 60 years. Now I don't believe in anything except the sound of my own footsteps in an empty house. The doorbell rang again, 2 short buzzes. That was my daughter-in-law's signature, short and impatient like everything she did. Her name is Stephanie. She was married to my youngest son for 8 years. They lived 15 minutes away in a split-level house with a 2-car garage and a backyard fence they still haven't painted. I helped them with the down payment, $40,000, cash. I took it out of the account I shared with my husband. He didn't know. He never knew about half the things I did for those kids. I thought that was what mothers did. I thought that was love. I opened the door. Stephanie was standing there with her arms crossed. She was wearing a black Lululemon top and those leggings that cost more than my first car. Her hair was in a tight ponytail. Her face was already hard. She didn't say hello. She said, "We need to talk." I said, "Sure, honey, come in. I just made iced tea." She walked past me like I was a piece of furniture. She went straight to the kitchen and sat at the table where we had eaten Thanksgiving dinner for 32 years. The table where my son proposed to her. The table where I taught my grandchildren how to roll pie dough. The table where my husband sat every single night for 4 decades, reading the newspaper while I cleaned the dishes. That table. She looked at me and said, "Mom, I'm going to be honest with you." I said, "I always appreciate honesty." She said, "You are too much. You are here all the time. You call 3 times a day. You show up unannounced. You bring food nobody asked for. You interfere with how we are raising the kids. And I am done." I sat down across from her. My knees made that soft cracking sound they always make now. I looked at her face and saw nothing. No anger, no frustration, just cold, flat decision, like she had rehearsed this in the mirror for a week. I said, "Stephanie, I'm sorry if I have overstepped." "That was never my intention. I love you all so much." She shook her head and said, "It's not about intentions. It's about boundaries. You don't understand boundaries. You think because you gave birth to him that you own him forever, but you don't. He is mine now. This is my family. You are extended family, and extended family stays in their lane." I didn't cry. I wanted to, but something inside me went quiet. A door closed somewhere deep in my chest. I said, "Okay, I will do better. I will call less. I will ask before I come over." She stood up and said, "No, you don't get it. I don't want you to call less. I don't want you to ask before you come over. I don't want you to come over. I want you to leave us alone, completely, for a while, maybe forever. I don't know yet." She walked out. She didn't close the door. I had to get up and close it myself. I stood there with my hand on the knob, and I watched her get into her white SUV and pull out of the driveway too fast. She didn't look back. I waited for her to look back. Mothers always look back. Daughters-in-law apparently do not. That was 2 years ago, but I am not here to tell you about Stephanie. Stephanie was just the warm-up act. The real show came later, the one where the stage catches fire and the audience keeps clapping because they think it's part of the performance. My name is Margaret. I am 68 years old. I have 3 children, 2 daughters and 1 son. The son is Kevin. He is the one married to Stephanie. The daughters are Jennifer and Claire. Jennifer is 44. Claire is 41. Their father is my husband, Richard. Richard is 71. We have been married for 46 years. That is what I tell people. That is what I told myself. 46 years of marriage, 3 children, 5 grandchildren, a house in a good neighborhood, a retirement account that was supposed to last until we were both dead, a life that looked from the outside like a picture in a catalog. But catalogs lie, pictures lie, and some people spend their whole lives building a beautiful lie because the truth is too ugly to look at. I met Richard in 1977. I was 22. He was 25. He worked at a bank. I was a receptionist at a dental office. We met at a bar called the Rusty Anchor. It is not there anymore. It is a parking lot now. But back then, it was dark and loud and smelled like cigarettes and beer. He bought me a whiskey sour. He told me I had the most beautiful green eyes he had ever seen. He told me he wanted to marry me on our 3rd date. I thought that was romantic. Now I think that was the first red flag. But when you are 22 and a man looks at you like you are the only woman in the world, you don't see flags, you just see a future. We got married in June. My mother cried. My father walked me down the aisle in a dress I had saved for months to buy. White lace, long sleeves, a train that got dirty from the church steps. I still have that dress in a box in the attic. I don't know why. Maybe because it is the only thing from that day that still feels real. The first 10 years were good. Hard, that good. Richard worked his way up at the bank. I stayed home with Jennifer, and then Claire, and then Kevin. 3 babies in 5 years. I was exhausted all the time. My body changed. My mind changed. I stopped being a woman and became a mother. That is what happens. You lose yourself slowly. Not all at once. One diaper change at a time. One sleepless night at a time. One forgotten birthday for yourself at a time. You think you will find yourself again when they get older. But older comes and you realize you have been gone so long you don't remember who you were in the first place. Richard was a good provider. He never missed a day of work. He put money in the college fund every month. He bought me a new car every 5 years. He never hit me. He never yelled at me. He never cheated on me. Or so I thought. That is the thing about thinking. Thinking is not knowing. Thinking is just hoping with better posture. The cracks started showing after Kevin was born. Richard worked later. He traveled more. He went on golf weekends with the guys from the bank. He came home smelling different. Not like another woman. Like something I couldn't name. He was distant. He was quiet. He stopped looking at me when I talked. I asked him if something was wrong. He said no. I asked him if he still loved me. He said, "Of course I do, Margaret. Don't be ridiculous." I asked him if there was someone else. He laughed and said, "You watch too much television." So I stopped asking. That is what women of my generation did. We stopped asking. We kept folding the towels. We kept making the iced tea. We kept showing up at parent-teacher conferences and PTA meetings and soccer games and piano recitals. We kept the house clean and the children fed and the husband happy. And we never, ever asked the questions that might break everything apart. Because what would we do if everything broke apart? Where would we go? Who would we be? We had no answers, so we chose silence. Jennifer was the first to leave for college. She went to UC Davis. She studied business. She met a boy named Michael. They got married. They moved to Portland. She had 2 girls. Then she had a boy. She called me once a week, sometimes twice. She told me about her life. I listened. That was my job. Listen and nod and say, "That sounds hard, honey, but you are so strong." She never asked about me. Not really. She asked how I was, the way you ask a cashier how their day is going. You don't actually want the answer. You are just being polite. Clay went to community college. She stayed close. She worked at a florist shop for 10 years. Then she met a man named Todd. Todd was a contractor. He built decks and fences and sometimes entire additions to houses. Claire and Todd had 2 sons. They lived 20 minutes from me. I saw them every Sunday for dinner. I babysat the boys every Tuesday and Thursday while Claire worked. I never asked for money. I never asked for gas. I just showed up with snacks and patience and a willingness to watch the same Disney movie 14 times in a row. That is what grandmothers do. We show up. We are always showing up. Until one day we realize nobody has ever shown up for us. Kevin was the baby. He was always my favorite. I know mothers are not supposed to have favorites, but Kevin was different. He was born with a kindness that the girls didn't have. He hugged me for no reason. He held my hand in public until he was 13. He cried at movies. He wrote me letters when he went to summer camp. He told me I was the best mom in the whole world. He meant it. I know he meant it. That is what makes what happened so hard to breathe through. Kevin met Stephanie at a coffee shop. She was a barista. He was a customer. She wrote her phone number on his cup in purple marker. He kept the cup for a year. I found it in his childhood bedroom when I was cleaning out the closet. He had taped it to the inside of his nightstand drawer. I smiled when I saw it. I thought, this is it. This is the girl who will love my son the way I loved his father. I was wrong about everything. They got married in a small ceremony in Stephanie's parents' backyard. Her parents are nice people. They live in a ranch house with a pool and 3 dogs. Her father is retired military. Her mother sells real estate. They welcomed me like family. They invited me to Christmas. They invited me to birthdays. They invited me to barbecues. I thought we were one big, happy family. I thought we were all in this together. I thought a lot of things. The first grandchild came fast, a girl. They named her Lily. She had Kevin's eyes and Stephanie's mouth. She was beautiful. I held her in the hospital room and I cried. Stephanie looked at me and said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Because I am so happy." She said, "Okay, but please don't get tears on the baby." I laughed. I thought she was joking. She was not joking. She never jokes. That is one thing I learned about Stephanie over the years. She has no humor in her. Everything is serious. Everything is a test. Everything is a boundary that you might cross at any moment. Walking through her house felt like walking through a minefield. One wrong step and you are gone. But I loved my son, and I loved my granddaughter, so I walked carefully. I called before I came. I texted before I called. I asked permission for everything. Can I bring cookies? Can I take Lily to the park? Can I buy her shoes for school? Can I come to her dance recital? Can I sit in the back so I don't bother anyone? I made myself small. I made myself quiet. I made myself invisible. Because that is what you do when you are afraid of being pushed away. You shrink until you are nothing, and then you hope they let you stay. They had a second child, a boy. They named him Jack. He looked just like Kevin. Same nose, same ears, same way of scrunching his face when he was about to cry. I loved that boy from the moment I saw him. I would have died for him. I would have killed for him. I would have given him every dollar I had. And I almost did. Let me tell you about the money, because the money is important. The money is where the real betrayal lives. The emotional stuff hurts. The coldness, the distance, the way Stephanie looked at me like I was a stain on her carpet. That hurt. But the money was a knife that went in slow and twisted for years. Richard and I saved for our entire lives. We put money in the bank every month. We put money in retirement accounts. We invested in the stock market. We bought this house in 1985 for $120,000. It is worth $800,000 now. We paid off the mortgage 10 years ago. We owned everything free and clear. The house, the 2 cars, the lake property in Michigan that we bought as a vacation home. That lake property was my dream. Richard didn't want it. He said it was too far. He said it was too much work. He said we would never use it. But I pushed. I pushed because I wanted somewhere to go with the grandchildren, somewhere with a dock and a fire pit, and a place to make s'mores and memories. I wanted them to have what I never had, a place where family gathered and laughed and stayed up late telling stories. I wanted that so badly I could taste it. We bought the lake property in 2008, right before the market crashed. Stupid timing. But we held on. We always held on. Richard said we should sell it in 2015. I said no. He said we should sell it in 2018. I said no. He said we should sell it in 2020 when the pandemic hit. I said absolutely not. That lake house was mine. It was the only thing that was fully mine. Richard had his golf clubs and his poker nights and his secret phone calls that I pretended not to hear. I had the lake house, a small 2-bedroom cabin with a screened-in porch and a rowboat and a hummingbird feeder just like the one at home. That cabin was my heart. Richard retired in 2019. He was 68. I was 66. We had big plans: travel, more time with the grandkids, maybe sell the big house and move somewhere smaller, maybe spend summers at the lake, maybe finally be happy. That was the plan. But plans are just hopes dressed up in business clothes. and hopes are just dreams that haven't been crushed yet. The first sign came 6 months after Richard retired. I was looking for a receipt in his desk drawer, the top drawer of the big oak desk in his study. He had kept that desk locked for years, but one day he left the key on the kitchen counter, a small brass key on a ring with nothing else on it. I picked it up. I didn't plan to use it. I just held it in my palm and looked at it. Then I walked to the study. Then I opened the drawer. I don't know what I was looking for. A receipt? A letter? A piece of my husband's life that he had kept hidden from me for reasons I didn't want to examine. What I found was a folder, a plain manila folder with no label. Inside were bank statements, not from our joint account, from an account I had never seen before, a checking account at a credit union across town. The statements went back 10 years, 10 years of deposits and withdrawals. The deposits were small at first, a few $100s here and there, but they grew. By the 5th year, he was depositing $2,000 a month. By the 8th year, it was $5,000. The withdrawals were regular too, every month like clockwork, the same amount, the same date, $1,500 every 15th of the month, for 10 years. I sat on the floor of his study with my back against the bookshelf, and I read every single statement. I read them twice. I read them 3 times. I tried to make sense of the numbers. $1,500 a month for 10 years. That is $180,000. $180,000 that Richard had taken from our family and given to someone else. I didn't know who. I didn't know why. But I knew in my bones that it was not for a good reason. Good reasons don't require secret bank accounts. Good reasons don't require locked drawers and hidden keys. I confronted him that night. I waited until the kids were gone. Jennifer had come for dinner with her family. Claire was there with Todd and the boys. Kevin came alone because Stephanie had a headache that happened every time there was a family gathering. A headache that meant, I don't want to be around your mother, but I don't want to say that out loud, so I will just call it a headache and let you deal with it. Kevin dealt with it the way he dealt with everything. He smiled, he hugged me, he told me he loved me, and then he left early to go home and take care of his wife. After everyone left, I stood in the kitchen and I looked at Richard. He was sitting in his recliner, watching the news. He had his feet up, he had a glass of bourbon in his hand. He looked comfortable, he looked content. He looked like a man who had never hidden anything in his entire life. I said, Richard, who is getting $1,500 a month from our money? He didn't flinch, he didn't choke, he didn't spill his bourbon. He just looked at me and said, I don't know what you are talking about. I said, the account at the credit union, the one you have been putting money into for 10 years. The one you have been sending $1,500 out of every month. Who is getting that money, Richard? He stared at me for a long time. The news played in the background. Something about the weather. Something about a fire somewhere far away. Then he turned off the television with the remote, and he put his glass on the side table and said, Sit down, Margaret. I didn't sit down. I stood in the doorway with my arms crossed, and my heart beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. He said, I didn't want you to find out this way. I said, find out what? He said, I have a daughter. I said, what? He said, I have a daughter from before we met. I was 22. I got a girl pregnant. She didn't want to keep the baby. I didn't want to keep the baby. But she had the baby anyway. A girl. She gave her up for adoption. I signed the papers. I walked away. I never looked back. Until 10 years ago. The girl found me. She found me through a DNA website. She sent me a message. She said she didn't want anything. She just wanted to know who her father was. So I met her, and she was beautiful, and she was smart, and she had my eyes, and I couldn't walk away again. So I started sending her money, not because she asked, because I wanted to, because I owed her, because I had spent 40 years pretending she didn't exist, and I couldn't pretend anymore. I didn't speak for what felt like a long time. The clock on the wall ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. I said her name. What is her name? He said Sarah. I said Sarah what? He said Sarah Mitchell. That was her adoptive family's name. I said, where does she live? He said Portland. I said Portland, Oregon. He said yes. I said, how old is she? He said 45. I said, she is older than Jennifer. He said, yes. I said, you had a child before me. He said, yes. You kept this from me for 46 years. He didn't say yes that time. He just looked at the floor. I walked out of the room. I walked up the stairs. I walked into the bedroom we had shared since 1979. I closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, and I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not throw anything. I just sat there, because sometimes the shock is so complete that your body doesn't know what to do. It just freezes. It just waits. It just holds all the pain in a little box somewhere deep inside and hopes that the box is strong enough to keep it contained. The box was not strong enough. The box broke 3 days later. I was in the grocery store. I was buying milk and bread and eggs. The things you always buy, even when your world is falling apart, because habits are stronger than grief. I turned the corner into the cereal aisle and I saw a young mother with her daughter. The daughter was maybe 4 years old. She had her mother's hair and her mother's smile. She was reaching for a box of sugary cereal. Her mother laughed and said, "No, baby, we need something healthy." The little girl pouted. Her mother picked her up and kissed her forehead. And I started crying, right there in the cereal aisle. Loud, ugly crying that made people look away because they didn't know what to do with a crying old woman. I leaned on my shopping cart and I cried for the girl Richard had abandoned. I cried for the secret he had kept. I cried for the 45 years of her life that he had missed, and the 46 years of my life that he had built on a foundation of lies. And then I cried for myself, for the woman who had folded towels and made iced tea and shown up at every soccer game and piano recital and parent-teacher conference, and thought that was enough, thought that would protect her, thought that love was a shield. But love is not a shield. Love is a knife. And the people you love the most are the ones who know exactly where to cut. I told Jennifer first. I called her the next day. I said, "Honey, I need to tell you something about your father." She said, "What about him?" I said, "He has a daughter from before we were married, a daughter he never told us about." There was a long silence. Then Jennifer said, "I know." The air left my lungs. I said, "What do you mean you know?" She said, "I have known for 2 years. Dad told me when I visited Portland for that work conference. He asked me to meet her. So I met her. Her name is Sarah. She is nice. She works as a nurse. She has 2 kids. She is married to a firefighter. She's a good person, Mom. She didn't ask for any of this." I said, "You met her and you didn't tell me?" Jennifer said, "Dad asked me not to. He said he wanted to tell you himself." I said, "He didn't tell me. I found out from a bank statement." There was another silence. Then Jennifer said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know what to do." I said, "You could have told me the truth. That is what you could have done." My daughter, my firstborn. I held you in my arms and I promised to protect you, and you couldn't even give me the truth. She started crying. I hung up the phone. I have not hung up on my daughter ever in my life, but I hung up that day because I realized something. My family was not my family. They were strangers who lived in my house and ate my food and called me Mom, but kept secrets from me like I was a neighbor they barely knew. Claire was next. I called her. She answered on the second ring. I said, "Claire, did you know about your father's daughter?" She said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "The daughter he had before me. The one in Portland. The one named Sarah." Claire said, "No. I have no idea what you are talking about." I believed her. Claire cannot lie. She never could. When she was little, she would try to lie about eating cookies before dinner, and her face would turn red and she would start sweating. She is 41 now, and her face still turns red when she tells a half-truth. So I believed her. And that made it worse somehow. That one daughter kept the secret, and the other didn't. That one daughter looked me in the eye for 2 years and pretended everything was fine. That one daughter sat at my table and ate my Thanksgiving dinner and laughed at my stories and kissed me goodbye and never once said, "By the way, Mom, Dad has another family." Jennifer did that. Jennifer chose her father over me, and that was a betrayal I did not see coming.
not for my own child.
I didn't tell Kevin. I couldn't. Kevin was Stephanie's now. Kevin would tell Stephanie, and Stephanie would use it against me somehow. That is what Stephanie did. She collected information like weapons. She stored it in her mind and waited for the right moment to use it. I had seen her do it to other people. Her own mother, her sister, her friends. She would smile and nod and listen, and then months later she would drop a comment that cut straight to the bone. I knew she would do the same to me, so I kept my mouth shut about Richard's daughter. I kept my mouth shut about a lot of things. But Richard was not done. The daughter was just the beginning. The real storm was still out at sea. It was just waiting for the right moment to make landfall. It came 6 months later. I was at the lake house, alone. Richard said he had to work on some paperwork. He didn't work. He was retired. But he went to his study and closed the door, and that was that. So I drove to the lake, 2.5 hours north. I listened to old music on the radio, songs from the 70s, songs that made me remember being young and in love and full of hope. I sang along. I tapped the steering wheel. For 2.5 hours, I pretended I was someone else, someone whose husband had not lied for 46 years, someone whose daughter had not kept a secret from her, someone whose daughter-in-law did not look at her like she was a bug on the sidewalk. I was good at pretending. I had been pretending my whole life. I got to the lake house around noon. The sun was high, the water was calm. The hummingbirds were fighting over the feeder, just like at home. I sat on the porch with a glass of lemonade, and I let myself breathe for the first time in weeks. I thought maybe I could stay here. Maybe I could sell the big house and move here full-time. Maybe I could let Richard have his secrets and his daughter and his hidden bank accounts. Maybe I could just be alone. Alone sounded peaceful. Alone sounded like a relief. I went inside to use the bathroom. That is when I noticed it. The cabin smelled wrong. Not like lake water and old wood and the candle I always burned. It smelt like perfume. A young perfume. Sweet and sharp. The kind of perfume you buy at a department store counter. The kind of perfume that is marketed to women under 30. I stood in the living room and I smelled the air, and I felt my stomach turn over. Someone had been here. Someone who was not me and not Richard. I walked through the cabin slowly. The kitchen was clean. The dishes were put away. The counter was wiped. But the coffee maker was out. Richard never used the coffee maker. He drank tea. I used the coffee maker, but I had not been here in 3 weeks. The coffee maker was clean and dry, but it had been moved. It was sitting at an angle. I always kept it straight, parallel to the edge of the counter. I am particular about things like that. I have always been particular. It is not obsessive. It is just the way I keep order in a world that has none. The bedroom was worse. The bed was made, but the sheets were not the sheets I kept on the bed. Those were in the linen closet. These sheets were different. Soft, gray cotton. Expensive. I touched them and they felt cool and smooth. I pulled back the duvet. There were 2 pillows. Both had indentations. 2 people had slept in my bed. In my lake house. In the only place I thought was mine. I sat on the edge of the bed, just like I had sat on the edge of the bed at home when I found out about Richard's daughter. I sat there and I looked at the walls, the pictures I had hung, the quilt my grandmother made, the lamp I bought at an antique store 20 years ago. Everything was mine, but the bed smelled like perfume, like sex, like a stranger. And I knew in the way that women always know but pretend not to. Richard had brought someone here. Not Sarah. Sarah was his daughter. This was someone else. This was someone he was sleeping with. Someone young enough to wear sweet department store perfume. Someone who left indentations in pillows. Someone who moved coffee makers and did not put them back. I did not call Richard. I did not text him. I did not drive home and confront him. I just sat there on the edge of that bed for 2 hours. Then I stood up. I stripped the sheets. I put them in a garbage bag. I took the garbage bag to the dumpster behind the cabin. I came back inside. I opened all the windows. I let the lake air blow through the rooms. I made the bed with my sheets, the ones from the linen closet, the ones that smelled like lavender and home. Then I sat back on the porch and finished my lemonade. And I made a decision. I was going to find out the truth, every last piece of it, and then I was going to decide what to do. Not Richard, not my children, not Stephanie, me. It took me 3 weeks to find her. Her name was Amanda. She was 32 years old. She worked at a yoga studio. She had long blonde hair and a smile that was too bright. She posted pictures of herself on Instagram in bikinis and workout clothes and fancy restaurants. Richard was in some of the pictures, his arm around her waist, his face close to hers, his wedding ring visible in every single shot. He did not even have the decency to take off his ring. That is how little he thought of me. That is how invisible I had become. I found the pictures on her public profile. I did not have to hack anything. I did not have to hire a private investigator. I just typed her name into my phone, the same phone I used to text my grandchildren, the same phone I used to order groceries, the same phone I used to call my daughters. Technology is a miracle and a curse. It gives you everything you want and then shows you everything you never wanted to see. Amanda had been with Richard for 2 years. 2 years. That meant he started seeing her right after he retired, right after we made our big plans. Right after I thought we would finally have time for each other. He had time, he just did not want to spend it with me. He wanted to spend it with a 32-year-old woman who could touch her toes and wear a bikini and laugh at his jokes without hearing the echo of 46 years of disappointment. I saved the pictures. I downloaded them all. I put them in a folder on my phone labeled receipts, because that is what they were. Receipts for the destruction of my marriage. I did not cry this time. I had no tears left. The well was dry. The desert had taken over. I was just a woman with a phone full of evidence and a house full of lies. I confronted Richard on a Tuesday. I waited until after dinner. I waited until he was settled in his recliner with his bourbon and his news. I walked into the room and I turned off the television. He looked at me like I had slapped him. I said, "Amanda is pretty." He said, "What?" I said, "Amanda, the yoga instructor, the one you have been sleeping with for 2 years, the one whose perfume I smelled on the sheets at the lake house, the one whose Instagram is full of pictures of you with your arm around her. Do you want to see the pictures, Richard? I have them on my phone. I can show you, in case you forgot what she looks like." He did not deny it. He did not apologize. He did not explain. He just put his bourbon down and looked at me and said, "What do you want me to say?" I said, "I want you to tell me the truth. For once in your life, I want you to tell me the truth." He said, "The truth is, I have been unhappy for a long time." I said, "So have I, but I did not go out and find a boyfriend." He said, "Maybe you should have." I stared at him. I could not believe those words came out of his mouth. Maybe you should have. As if my fidelity was a mistake, as if my loyalty was weakness, as if the 46 years I spent raising his children and keeping his house and cooking his meals and folding his towels was just a waste of time that I should have spent chasing younger men. I said, "I want a divorce." He said, "Okay." Just like that. "Okay. No fight, no tears, no please, Margaret, let us work this out. Just okay." As if he had been waiting for me to say it, as if he had already moved on in his mind and his heart and his body, and he was just waiting for me to catch up. The divorce took 8 months. 8 months of lawyers and paperwork and meetings and phone calls and emails and spreadsheets and valuations and negotiations. We split everything down the middle. The house, the cars, the retirement accounts, the lake house. He fought me on the lake house. He said he wanted it. I said, "You brought another woman there. You do not get to keep it." My lawyer was a woman named Diane. She was 55. She had gray hair and a sharp tongue, and she did not take any of Richard's bullshit. She looked at him across the table and said, "My client is being generous. Do not test her generosity." Richard backed down. He always backed down when women stood up to him. He just never expected me to be one of them. I kept the lake house. I kept the big house, too. We sold it, split the proceeds. I could not stay there. Too many memories. Too many meals at that table. Too many nights in that bed. Too many years of pretending. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. It was smaller. It was quieter. It was mine. No Richard. No his recliner. No his bourbon. No his secrets. Just me and my hummingbird feeder, and the towels I folded perfectly every morning. My children reacted the way I expected. Jennifer called me and said, Mom, I am so sorry. I did not know about Amanda. I swear I did not know. I said, okay. I did not say I forgive you, because I did not forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Claire came over with a lasagna and a bottle of wine, and she sat on my new couch, and she held my hand, and she cried with me. She cried for me. That is the difference between Claire and Jennifer. Claire cries with you. Jennifer cries for herself. Kevin came alone, without Stephanie. He sat at my new kitchen table, the one I bought from IKEA, the one I assembled myself with a little Allen wrench and a lot of curse words. He looked at me and his eyes were red. He said, Mom, I am so sorry about Dad. I said, thank you, honey. He said, Stephanie wants me to tell you something. I said, what does Stephanie want you to tell me? He said, she wants me to tell you that she thinks you are making a mistake. That you should have stayed with Dad and worked it out. That divorce is a sin, and you are setting a bad example for the grandchildren. I laughed. I actually laughed. I said, Kevin, does Stephanie know that your father has been sleeping with a 32-year-old yoga instructor for 2 years? He said, yes, I told her. I said, and she still thinks I am the one making a mistake? He looked down at the table. He said, Mom, I love you, but I have to live with her. You understand? I said, I understand. And I did understand. I understood that my son was choosing his wife over his mother. That is what husbands do. That is what they have always done. They choose the woman in their bed, not the woman who changed their diapers. That was the last real conversation I had with Kevin. He calls me on my birthday. He calls me on Christmas. He sends me pictures of Lily and Jack. The pictures come from his phone, not Stephanie's. Stephanie blocked me on social media. She blocked my number. She told Kevin that she does not want me around her children because I am a bad influence. A bad influence? A 68-year-old woman who was cheated on by her husband of 46 years. That is a bad influence. Not the man who actually did the cheating. Not the man who lied and snuck around and brought another woman to our lake house. Me, the victim. I am the bad influence. That was 2 years ago. 2 years since the divorce. 2 years since I lost my husband, my lake house, my family, and my sense of who I am. I am 68 years old. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment. I have a hummingbird feeder on the balcony. I have a cat named Mabel. I have the same yellow towels I was folding when Stephanie came to tell me I was too much. I still fold them perfectly, corners tucked in tight, no wrinkles. My mother would be proud.